Ian Garry humiliates Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. Earlier today, Ian Garry did an interview with Ariel Helwani where he went off on Usman, Covington, and pretty much the entire top six of the UFC welterweight division. He spoke upon the ducking that's seemingly taking place with Usman not accepting a fight against either Garry nor Shavkat Rakhmonov, and the obvious ducking that we already know about with the Ian Garry Colby Covington situation, where Colby's gone running. He's willing to step in to fight Joaquin Buckley, but he was not even close to interested fighting at UFC Tampa when the name was going to be Ian Garry. Why is that? I think that he sees that as a very difficult matchup, and he doesn't want to give a brash prospect a chance to take him out. Instead, Ian Garry now is in the number one contender fight this Saturday against Shavkat, and I think it's a best case scenario for him. And it's a very cool clash because you have two undefeated guys fighting in the number one contender fight. Now, today's video is not a breakdown of Ian Garry versus Shavkat. What I'm going to be doing is reacting to this interview, and I'll also be playing a couple of clips from a recent Colby Covington interview, as well as Usman, who did his UFC 310 preview on his own podcast. And he said some things about Garry, nothing too scorched earth and crazy, but you can tell that he's very emotional, and it seems like he's deflecting a little bit because there's more going on behind the scenes than what's being said by Usman. Colby Covington, the king of the duck. Usman seeming like he's ducking a big fight and looking for stylistic matchups that favor him, kind of cherry picking a bit. And Colby Covington, taking the Buckley fight, ends up fighting backwards. So kind of worst case scenario, he fights a big knockout artist who has a smaller value, right, in the UFC welterweight division as far as like fan appeal goes than Ian Garry. But hey, Colby decided to do it. He's ducking him so hard, he's willing to take a tricky matchup against someone who's less popular. I really liked the interview for Ian Garry here. I know he eats a ton of flack. They call him a cock and this, and that. But when you sit down and listen to Garry's interview, it's kind of refreshing. He's willing to fight anybody. He talks the talk. He's willing to get in there and throw down. He's calling out big names. He's looking for the best fights. And if you compare him to like Michael Chandler, who's talking delusional cope even in the lead up to his fights with Charles Oliveira, I like that Ian Garry at the least keeps it real. He's brash, he's confident, but at least he's not, going back and forth and being a complete hypocrite. And it's not constant cope and things like that. Granted, he's undefeated, so I guess he hasn't had a moment to cope with us for a loss and make all these excuses. But right now, he seems like the brash Irishman on the come up to keep an eye on, which we all knew about. I want to jump into the clips. I'm going on a damn tangent over here. Let's look at some Ian Garry. Ian Garry's being very based, and it's kind of refreshing to have a video where I'm not shafting the guy who's doing the interview. Instead, he's talking some smack, and I'm siding with him. I'm doubling down with him because I think that he brings some good points. We're going to listen to first clip, which is about the goal of, obviously Ian Garry was the Covington or Usman fight, but I think he got a better outcome here. Let's listen in.
Full context with the matchmakers. Initially, the goal was to line up a fight with Colby Covington. Again, it's no secret that he's been running. Then they went down the line and let's look at Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman's words were literally the words I heard from the UFC were Kamaru Usman wants nothing to do with you, as in he's just running as well.
Ian Garry's talking confident, but I mean, there's truth behind the Colby thing for sure. I'm not BSing. He literally has a matchup booked, Colby Covington, against Buckley, who was supposed to be Garry's opponent, and Garry wanted to fight him at UFC Tampa. So he was definitely ready to get in the cage, but was refusing to fight Garry. He's trying to remain relevant, and maybe Colby's looking for a chance to get a W over Buckley and then call for another undeserved title shot because he seems to think that he still has that type of value. I mean, a few weeks ago, we'll look at that interview clip soon after we do some more Ian Garry. We have Colby Covington talking about that Ian Garry's not worthy of a big fight. Ian Garry's fighting ahead of him in the rankings. He's fighting a big fight. He's more than worthy. I think that if Ian Garry wins Saturday, then Colby Covington is by no means worthy of a fight against Ian Garry. Now, as far as the Usman situation, I would normally be like, well, Usman's not one to duck fights, but I will say he said, "Oh, I was thinking about stepping in." We can watch the clip real quick of him just because I think it's a worthwhile look to see how emotional he looked as he's talking about it, right? So he was talking about the matchup and he makes it like I was willing to get in there, but it's just he seems so pissed off as he's talking about it. It makes me really believe Ian Garry.
I was potentially going to slide into, but I've touched on this a million times, which is crazy to me, Henry, because I'm seeing online people go, "Oh, you scared? You duck him? You ducked him? You scared? You scared?" I'm like, what?
Why is he so bothered though? If he's not ducking and he's not scared, why is he so upset? He said, "Listen, I'll fight him, but I'm not ready right now." This is the body language and the tone and the cope of somebody who didn't want to fight against Shavkat or Ian Garry because he doesn't want to take a risk to fight a very tricky matchup against up-and-comers. Either one of them, being Shavkat or being Ian Garry, doesn't make a difference. Either one gives a lot of trouble to Kamaru Usman. His mobility's gone. His knees are gone. He needs to fight somebody with a glaring hole in his game. Later in the interview, Ian Garry mentions the matchup that he believes Kamaru Usman wants, and we'll react to that as we get there. But I just quickly had to show you Usman being emotional because I think that does kind of prove Garry's point a bit. If I wouldn't have seen that clip of him getting so bothered, if he was more straight up, I'm like, nah, Garry's pulling at straws. Maybe it's true. He doesn't want anything to do with him. He's a tricky prospect. He wants to handpick. What's interesting, though, is Ian Garry did mention that he was not satisfied with the fight against Joaquin Buckley, but you have to commend the man for taking a fight against somebody he really didn't want to be in there against because he literally fight before was fighting backwards against MVP. Regardless of how you think the fight went, he still pulled off a win. Let's listen in.
Was it like, all right, I'll fight, but this isn't exactly what I had in mind. This isn't doing it for me?
Yes, a little bit. Because as I've said, all I've done in my career is win. I'm 8-0 in the UFC, 15-0 in general. I'm a former world champion in a different organization. I've come in here and I've done everything that I've needed to do to progress in my career and fight guys up the rankings that get me one step closer to a world title opportunity. I don't believe me going out there and running through Joaquin Buckley does the same as me going out there and running through Colby or Usman or Shavkat or any of those guys.
Which is a fact. It's 100% true that it wouldn't move the needle for him as much, but his willingness to get in there and accept the fight against Joaquin Buckley then led him to the fight against Shavkat because the UFC knew he would be ready. This was a best case scenario. Say, yeah, I'm willing to fight backwards and take on Buckley, but then the massive opportunity arises and they're like, hey, Shavkat needs a fight for the #1 contender matchup and you're in it now. So this turned out to be great for Ian Garry, being willing to really take on anybody, then kind of had the stars aligning because I'll be honest with you, if not for this fight opening up with Shavkat, Bilal being injured, I think that I think that Ian Garry would have maybe eventually fought a Colby, right? After he beats a Buckley, he still could have been one more fight away from a top contender matchup. This kind of skyrocketed him right into the elites. He's still young at 27, could be too much too soon. We'll see Saturday, but regardless of outcome, the willingness to fight is something that I like about Ian Garry. There's a lot of guys that talk that shit that are looking to finagle the proper matchups. Ian Garry really is about fighting anybody, and I respect him for that a lot. Now, he brings a little bit of fire to Kamaru Usman, who we know is ducking this fight now. Emotional Usman, we're going to call him today. And let's listen to this.
Like he wanted an interim title fight and maybe Usman was in the talks and whatnot.
Usman was never in the talks. Usman is running. Usman was never in the talks. He was mentioned about it, but that man was never taking a fight with me or Shavkat. Let's be real about that.
And I think that's straight facts. I think that's straight facts. And it's ironic that earlier today, the podcast gets released between Henry Cejudo and Usman leading up to this interview where you could tell he was upset about the potential pushback against him. And I think Ian Garry capitalized on the moment because I expect the next episode of Usman's podcast, him to be a little more heated. As of right now, I've checked Twitter. I haven't seen Usman fire back at Ian Garry yet. Same with Colby Covington. I haven't seen him fire back yet. I hope that they do. I think it'll be more fun if they do. But I have to say, I believe that Usman and I believe that Colby Covington don't want this fight because it is a difficult matchup, but also it's against a brash Irishman who might get under their skin, and a loss to the new generation is something that seemingly, at least Usman doesn't want to risk. You could say Buckley's kind of willing now right? Or excuse me, Colby's willing now with the Buckley fight, right? That's made him willing. But I think that was kind of like a four-step-in type spot. It's like, listen, you fight Buckley or we're booting you out the rankings. Like, what are you going to do? Just sit on the sidelines forever? Now, what's really cool about Ian Garry here, and which is what I will assume is the reason he got the fight, is the UFC brash respects him a lot because he said this leading up to UFC 310 before his fight was ever scheduled with Buckley or with Shavkat.
Stuff like that. So I know you guys don't have a backup for December 7th. Let me be the backup. Let me prepare for either Bilal or Shavkat. I'll be there. I'll weigh in. I'll be ready to fight in case anything happens. And that will make sure that you've got a security, a safety net.
They told him no. They didn't want to do that. But what I think they got from it and they took, okay, well, if something does happen and there's enough time in between, there's a guy in Ian Garry who's willing to step in. And you got to respect the balls on him because he jumped in and taken on Shavkat, who's 18-0 and looking like the boogeyman. Anybody who's a top prospect, undefeated like Ian Garry, could say no to the matchup and look for easier fights and try to wait and avoid a Shavkat matchup to potentially being, a title fight against Shavkat. Instead, number one contender chance. I think it's a good move. The confidence is high. Ian Garry is going to look like a genius if he goes out there and upset Shavkat Rakhmonov this Saturday. The big if is the upset. But regardless, I like his mentality. I like that he's willing to throw down and fight. I'm not expecting, Ian Garry to be ducking big fights moving forward. And I think that taking a massive opportunity like this, either way, regardless of outcome, puts him in the UFC's favor. And I think he's more likely to get a big fight next time, even if it's not with a win and then fighting for the belt against Bilal. I still think you see maybe an Ian Garry versus, Colby. If Colby wins, it could end up even being somebody like a Jack Della or an Usman. There's a lot of what ifs. We're looking too far into the future. We still got to fight Saturday. But either way, I like what Ian Garry has said, and I like the mentality that he brings to the table. I got to give respect where it's due, and I have to say, I think that Usman and Colby don't want to fight him. They don't like the brash confidence. They don't like fighting Shavkat. They don't want to fight either one of them. They don't want to take on new generation guys unless it's somebody with a potential flaw in the game, which we're going to get to. But first, we do have to listen to Ian Garry going off on Colby Covington. It's a worthwhile listen, all right? It's always fun to hear Colby get absolutely flacked. And we'll play some Colby Covington clips. I have them loaded up and time-stamped, but we're just waiting until the right moment. Let's listen in.
And you found out that it was, in fact, going to be Colby stepping in on the same day. What was your reaction?
Well, Ariel, how do you think I feel? Because I've been screaming and shouting about fighting that man from the rafters. This man's made videos about me, my wife, my kids, talked to him about all this shit. And here's this man avoiding me like the plague.
Avoiding him like the plague is a great way to just end off that clip because it's facts, though. Colby Covington did an interview 3 weeks ago with Submission Radio, and he said some delusional stuff, but the part that I wanted to bring up was around the 12-minute mark, I think 12:09. He talks about this fight against Garry, and he kind of flacks him. Let's just listen here.
There's no contract. If there was a contract, he would be showing it. He would be putting it everywhere. He's irrelevant. He hasn't done anything to deserve a fight of this magnitude. So the fight's never been offered. I don't know why he's talking about that. I've been offered 3 other fights. They weren't him. They didn't have his name on it. So
I just want to pause it right there. It's crazy how the tables have turned on Colby Covington. He's flexing that, Ian Garry's not worthy of fighting me. And now he's in the #1 contender fight on Saturday, and Colby Covington is now replacing Garry, taking on Joaquin Buckley in a fight night at UFC Tampa. A big spot for sure, but a matchup that I think Colby's live to lose because Buckley's pretty good at wrestling and hits really hard, and I would be very happy to see him get chinned. I think anybody would. We all want to see him get knocked out. It's time for Colby to get laid out, man. He talks a lot of mess, and I just think we have to just pile on the delusion with Colby. All right, so listen, this is Submission Radio. They have 230,000 subscribers, which very respectable number, 38,000 views on this interview. Not saying that the numbers are bad. 38,000 views is a lot, and 1,000 people liked it. That's a lot of people. But he claimed at 2025 that he's a UFC superstar. I don't think you're a UFC superstar if you're getting 38,000 views on an exclusive interview.
that built myself into this. All these other guys, they all try and throw stones. They all try and use my name to build themselves up, but they can't do anything for themselves. their name carries no value. So of course they have to attach their names to me to have any sort of value in the company and in the real world. So, you know, I don't pay attention to the jobbers and the nobodies in my division. Those guys are nothing but, you know, bums, and I don't pay attention to the bums.
All right, man. So
Whew. I don't know, man. I really hope that Colby's playing a heel most of the time, but I think he's an asshole still. And the fact that he can say that with a straight face is crazy. Irrelevant jobbers in the weight class. So Ian Garry, shavkat, irrelevant jobbers. I mean, according to Colby Covington, probably the champ is irrelevant too. I think that he's completely delusional and he's well past his prime, and he's just not in the mix as far as the true elite. So give respect to the guys in front of you, which he's not going to ever do because it's Colby Covington. But I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. The fact that, you know, Colby Covington has so much negative to say about Ian Garry, but he's the one not willing to fight. And then he jumps into the spot that Garry was supposed to fight in. So he could have signed the contract the whole time. He could have stepped in. So he's cowardly. And that is exactly what you're going to hear Ian Garry say here. So we got to listen in.
It just proves, it just shows that he's a coward, that he wants nothing to do with me. And the truth is, I know I've already beaten him.
He's got facts on that, though. I mean, he's ducking him for sure. You can say what you want. Oh, Colby's a fighter. He's not scared of anybody. He's scared of losing to Ian Garry. That's why he's not accepting it. He would rather get knocked out by Joaquin Buckley than lose to Garry. That's what it seems like to me. I don't know if you disagree in the comments. I feel like that's pretty sensible. He's willing to fight Colby Covington on a week's notice, though. He said, listen, I will jump and turn around and fight at UFC Tampa. It's obviously a joke, but he wants to fight Colby bad. Regardless of the outcome here, I think that's a fight that would be pretty awesome to set up.
Love this. All right. Here's my ideal scenario. I go out there December 7th, and I take out Shavkat early. I come out of there unscathed, uninjured. I get on the mic, and I sit down, and I say, hey, I could wait until next year when Bilal Muhammad's back. Or Dana Hunt, the UFC, I could walk my ass all the way down to Florida. And I could beat the bollocks out of Colby Covington for 25 minutes.
I like it. I like where he's coming from. I like the brash mentality, carrying the Conor McGregor torch of being a cocky Irishman with confidence. And it's kind of crazy how much flack Ian Garry got because of the situation with his wife and then him being considered a cock and whatnot and whatever. There's a lot that goes deep with that. And, you know, it's not what this video is about. The thing about Ian Garry that I do praise and I do respect is he stands on business more than a lot of these other guys. I mean, I spent all of last week listening to Michael Chandler come up with excuses to why he lost to Charles Oliveira, and in the lead up, excuses to why he could potentially lose to him. It's refreshing to hear Ian Garry be brash, cocky, and confident, but actually be willing to step in there and not just kind of, you know, tiptoe around and try to cherry pick the right matchups like Colby Covington would do, right? Now, this is good, though, because Colby Covington is not the only one who was in the sights of Ian Garry. We know he also brought some fire to Kamaru Usman, and that's not done yet. We got another nice roast from Ian Garry on Kamaru Usman. This one is definitely pretty high caliber, and if you haven't seen it on Twitter yet, you're not, you know, following the right pages, because you should.
Off a strong performance.
Because Usman has a big chest and little balls.
I think that was my favorite part of this whole damn interview. Usman has a big chest and little balls, man. Oh my God, that's funny as fuck. That was good. That was good, Ian Garry. Respect on that line right there. Get me tearing up over here. Holy smokes. Usman is past his prime, okay? I know for a fact that this version of Usman is like 70% of what he used to be, and I think he knows it too. He's not going to take a risky fight. He wants somebody with a potential hole in his game, which we're going to talk about in a moment. The proposed fight, Ian Garry mentioned it, and it actually makes a lot of sense the way that he lays it out. But first, just a little more roasting. He humiliates both Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman right here some more.
Again, him and Colby, they're older. They've been through the division. They've fought these guys. Now they're getting to the end of their careers. They want to choose the better stylistic matchups. I guarantee this. They are going to try, Usman is going to try push for a fight with Jack Della Maddalena.
Makes a lot of sense. He probably is going to try to push for a fight against Jack Della. And what he's going to say in a second, we'll play the clip, is talking about the wrestling. And also want to say the lag is not on my side. That's just on the damn side of this interview with Helwani and Garry. They are trying to cherry pick in a sense, but Colby Covington stepping in to fight Buckley, either he sees himself with such a massive wrestling edge and the chin to hold up that he thinks he can really outwork Joaquin Buckley, which maybe he could. But I think that is a really risky fight for Colby to jump in there and fight against Buckley. I was super surprised to see that fight announced, especially as much as, you know, he's been ducking Garry. To then fight Buckley is just so random to me. But it's what it is. It's a good fight to close out the year. And then as far as Usman, yeah, he's sitting on the sidelines until they give him what he wants. And I think that would probably be a fight against Jack Della. I get exactly where he's coming from. But Ian Garry could be wrong on one thing, though. Jack Della could be in the UFC's favor, and instead they might be doing Jack Della versus Leon Edwards, which I think is a super sick fight. And I would much prefer to see Jack Della versus Leon Edwards as opposed to Kamaru Usman versus Jack Della Maddalena. I just think it's a bigger fight. I think it's a better matchup. The way the stylistic clash is, you got the kickboxing style of Leon, right? He picks his shots well. You have more of the brawling pressure boxer style of Jack Della. I hope that's the fight they book, but I do think Usman wants to fight Jack Della. I don't think he wants to fight Sean Brady either. I think Sean Brady would actually be a pretty tough matchup for this older version of Kamaru Usman. Now, we have a few more roasts from the side of Ian Garry. He's not done laying it down and putting a little beating on Kamaru Usman. And he actually predicts how this fight's going to end as well. We'll play that at the end here. But one more roast of Kamaru Usman. The humiliation continues. And I think Usman's going to be pissed off. Expect a follow-up video to this series, because I really think that Kamaru is going to see this and be infuriated, because he's already sensitive about the ducking situation, and the fact that it's being brought to light even more so by Ian Garry, it's awesome. So let's listen in.
Quite easily. I guarantee Usman's going to try push for the JDM fight because he's weak-minded.
I have to
just boldly say that Usman's weak-minded, that's crazy. I think that's a little bit of a reach, though, because Usman's the former champ. This current version of Kamaru Usman doesn't have the same confidence. But, bro, he fought Hamzat on short notice. I got to kind of push back on Garry. The weak-minded narrative, you can roast him, you can make funny remarks. I don't think Usman's a weak-minded guy. I think he's just past his prime. He knows that his body is not capable of optimal performance anymore, and he wants more favorable fights. I don't think that it's going to be Jack Della next because, like I said, I think Leon Edwards and Jack Della is probably the fight. But I'm really excited for Usman to reply to all this. I'm really excited for Colby to fire back because I think this is going to be a fun little back and forth that will lead up to UFC 310 between the three of these fighters. And hopefully we have some more clips to react to in the coming days about this situation. Now, Ian Garry did keep it classy at the end, and he had a message for Shavkat Rakhmonov as well as a prediction for how this fight's going to go down. Let's quickly listen in to the last couple clips here.
You need to learn. So if Shavkat believes that the training that we had in the past is going to be the same on Saturday night when he steps into the octagon with me, then Shavkat, I'm speaking to you directly, you're going to be severely mistaken. And if I was you, I would change that mentality very quickly.
I think Shavkat Rakhmonov is going to be prepared for a more evolved Colby, to be fair. And I know they've sparred together, and Shavkat has even said on Twitter that, like, if the fight goes similar to sparring, pretty much saying that he got the better of Ian Garry. And then Ian pushing back at that. It's like, listen, what happens in training happens in training. It's all about the fight. It's true. Like, we talking about practice, man. As Allen Iverson once said, we're talking about practice. He does give a prediction for the fight where he was pretty brash here. We're going to pull this prediction up right at the end. We got, what, 25-12 it's at? Yeah, we got it right here. Let's check out the Ian Garry prediction for the 310 co-main.
I think he's going to come out strong. I think he's going to be aggressive. I think the first 2 rounds, you're going to see a lot of him trying to figure out my puzzle. And then I believe 3rd and 4th, I'm going to start to dominate. And I think by the 4th round, I think Shavkat's going to be gassed and he's not going to have anything to do. And I'll find the way to finish him.
Bold call out, finishing Shavkat. I don't see it, though. As much as I'm hyping up Ian Garry during this video, I think that, you know, if you guys have watched the predictions, you know, I don't really see him winning. Now, I do want to react to another clip here. At 34:57, I think Usman said some more weird shit. Like, he's questioning the training methods of Ian Garry. Ian Garry is known as, like, you know, a bit of a nomad, right? He's a traveler. He trains in all different spots around the world. And he was actually encouraged to train around the world by a training partner and former training partner of Kamaru Usman, as well as opponent Gilbert Burns. So it's interesting that we see Usman questioning those methods. Even Henry Cejudo pushed back against it. And that's why I think he's salty towards Ian Garry. Well, when he sees this interview with Helwani, he's going to be salty AF. Let's listen.
Too?
Yeah.
That may not be a bad thing, man.
It
Like,
may
that
not. No, like
be a
I
bad
said,
thing.
I'm not. I'm
like, 'cause there's knowledge. Knowledge is everywhere, but against Rockman's going to bring that grappling, that wrestling, where Ian is.
So we played the pushback first because we freaking clicked the wrong timestamp. But let's listen here.
And I know that if all else fails, these coaches are going to pour into me. Hey, let's get back to the fundamentals that we've spent hours and hours and hours in the gym building. So I worry about that with Ian Garry, having bounced around to this gym and that gym and this gym and that gym. I worry about that in a 5-round fight when you have to fight a dog, because I don't
think I agree. I think his fundamentals are already laid out and set. He's got his fundamental base all put together. I don't understand. I think this is just Usman's anti-Ian Garry stance. That's what I think it is. And that's why Cejudo fought back against it, right? We played the pushback right away. But still, I think it's very relevant. Strange to me how he pushed back against it. Or excuse me, strange to me how Usman was saying that it's not a good idea. And then obviously thankful that Henry Cejudo pushed back against it, because I don't agree with that narrative whatsoever. Now, I do want to react to the prediction that Usman gave out because he made a pick, but like he seemed emotional as he made it. Let's quickly look at Usman here.
putting on my professional hat, I can see a world where Ian Garry gets this one done, but I don't really care much for both guys. So I don't really care. I'm not picking.
You know, I don't really care. I don't care. I don't really care. Usman definitely cares. Usman is coping so hard. This has turned into a Kamaru Usman cope video unintentionally, man. Ian Garry humiliated him. Ian Garry humiliated Garry. And Usman's humiliating himself. And this is prelude, right? This is prior to the actual Ian Garry interview. This went down. I don't know if maybe Garry saw this clip of Usman and saw how, you know, upset he was. He's salty. That's the perfect way to say it. You can tell that Kamaru Usman is very salty about how everything happened. Now, I do want to just quickly play one last clip. And this is actually going to end up being on Twitter, but it's a worthwhile watch here. There was something that Ian Garry said that I didn't bring up earlier that I just, you know, I thought it was slightly delusional, but I like the confidence that he said it with. So let's just quickly listen to him talk about his plans if he does win the belt.
Who dreamt of being here, who wanted to see my face on billboards, who wanted to put on shows against the scariest people in the world. I've said to you before, how my ideal scenario is I fight, I beat Shavkat, I win the world title, I go up to middleweight, and I fight Khamzat, I win that belt too. I'm not afraid of any man.
If he can somehow pull that off, he'll go down as one of the greatest. I don't think he's going to do that. I think beating Khamzat is the craziest thing he said. You know, a little confident delusion goes a long way and is a good thing. But if he actually somehow wins the belt, moves up and fights Khamzat, I think he's probably going to get ran over. That's just me being honest. Khamzat's wrestling is a little bit of a different level. But, you know, is what it is. I think Ian Garry actually performed really well in an interview. And at least for me, it kind of turned me a little bit more on Ian Garry's side. You know, I'm not making the full flip to being like the hardest of hardcore Garry fans, but I like his confidence. I like that he speaks his mind and he shows up to the big fights and he's willing to step in on short notice. He's willing to do what some of these guys at the top are not willing to do, which is take the risky fights. He was down to fight Buckley and it led him to Shavkat. Shavkat's a harder fight. Shavkat's a bigger fight, but Shavkat's the chance of a lifetime. I hope you guys enjoyed this reaction video to everything. You guys know I enjoy making these. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Are you Team Ian Garry, at least in the beef with Usman and Covington? Or do you think maybe Ian Garry is reaching a little bit and you think he's just full of crap and you're still on that cuck narrative for life? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear from the people. Thank you guys for watching. Smash the likes if you're new, subscribe. And yeah, if you got nothing to say in the comments, at least drop a W in the chat to boost the algorithm for me. You know, keep an eye out because if Usman maybe follows up with a video, or maybe Covington as well, we might have more. There might be a whole Ian Garry saga between Usman, Covington, and Garry to potentially release throughout this UFC 310 fight week. So keep your eyes locked in on the channel. More content coming, videos every day, live streams more, and obviously bringing the fire with your reactions. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all on the next one. Much love and peace out.